Welcome. It is another episode of Tailboard Talks. I'm your host, Jerry Havens.
And I'm your guest host, Jim Vaughn.
Actually, Jim, we've got some big news. Things have changed on Tailboard Talks. Mark Forrester is no longer with ISPC. He has gone on to bigger and better things. We wish him all the best. But that left a hole to fill, and I am not an expert in this industry, and we needed one of those. So we hollered at our good friend and big brain, Mr. Jim Vaughn. Jim, welcome.
Well, thank you. And let's find out what it is I'm getting ready to do, because you remember when I first started in the industry, we didn't even have pagers. And here we are now. I'm running a podcast. My grandchildren are very excited about it.
Basically, what we're going to do is, I've made no bones about it. I'm just color commentary for this thing. But you're going to take over Mark's expertise duties on the podcast. And I'll tell you what, man, you did a 5-part series with Mark while I was out. And it got massive downloads and reviews. So who better to ask to take over the brain part of it than one of the most intelligent people I know in this industry. Now, that being said, you have already hit the ground running. You've got some guests in mind and different things that we're going to talk about. But one thing that I want to make sure that we always do, and that we did, is a tailboard. So tailboards are essential in our industry. They set the tone for the day. They set the tone for the job. And we want to make sure that we are doing the tailboard part of the Tailboard Talk. So, that being said, talk to me, Goose. What do you have? What's our Tailboard Talk today?
Well, let's see how many people that we can, let's see, what do they call it when you're trying to get people to react to something that you put on the internet? Trolling? Let's troll for some people, because it goes back to this idea of what we were just talking about technology and evolution and my age. And when you get up into the 70s, like I am, sometimes you don't care anymore what people think about what you say. And it kind of allows you to say some things that should be said that nobody is talking about. And that is something to do with this idea that we should be filming everything on our cell phones and posting it to the internet. Because what it's doing is it's compelling people in our industry to take some chances doing some things that they should not be doing, and then they're putting them on the internet. And I think that what's happening is we are now evolving into mentorship that is going to be challenging people to do some things they shouldn't be doing. So we're not going to be able to look at it today, because this is a sound-only podcast, but over the past few months, I've been collecting snips of photos from some videos that I've seen our line workers posting on the internet. And I now have 107 snip video pages in a PowerPoint program of people doing stupid stuff. And the reason why I picked each one of the snips is because on my computer, I have a case where we at ISPC have either investigated or have done a litigation over an incident where somebody was injured or killed doing the exact same thing. So wow. What I want to do is encourage us to start thinking about what it is that we're doing, because it's like what we say all the time is that every action has a consequence. Sometimes it's good consequence, which is because it's something that we want to happen, and sometimes it's a bad consequence. So if I'm out there doing climbing a structure and I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, and I'm putting stresses on my equipment that I shouldn't be putting stresses, and I'm doing some kind of a trick that makes me look really bold and really maybe even dangerous, and everybody's laughing and going, wow, that's really cool. What am I doing to that next generation of line workers who's coming up and seeing me do that thing and seeing people getting excited about it? Am I setting people up for failure? we need to be a lot more conscientious about what it is that we're putting out there now that we have this technology at our fingertips, and start taking responsibility for the liberties that we do have. How about that?
This podcast is sponsored by IP Institute. Develop your utility frontline leaders today at ip-institute.com.
And we're back. Don't forget UBM and IP Magazine. Hey, you mentioned actions have consequences, Jim. Also, I have to, being a camera guy, that's what I primarily do is I film the T&D Power Skills videos. I'm afraid of heights, but if I'm harnessed up and looking through the lens, I don't see the danger anymore. For some reason, it just doesn't click, and I'm not afraid anymore, right? That same thing is transferred looking through a phone lens when you're videoing somebody doing something stupid, and inaction has consequences just as much as your actions do. So you have to be aware that, yes, if you're not doing anything, you're not saying anything, you're just as complicit.
We are, and that's one of the things that has always been the nature of of safety in our industry, is that we work together as a crew. When we start out, our very beginning of the day, when we pull up on a job site, the very first thing that we do is we hold a tailboard, which is how this whole conversation got started. And really, it's almost unique to our industry. And if you were to do research on the evolution of job planning and job hazard analysis, you would find out that early in the evolution of OSHA, which was brought about by the William Steiger Worker Protection Act, the creation of OSHA, you will find out that one of the things that OSHA recognized when they were looking at industry was that the power line industry, considering the type of work that we do in very, very close proximity to exposed, energized conductors with very heavy weights suspended in manually operated rigging, OSHA says, wow, they actually have a pretty good safety record. Now, I'm, of course, coloring this a little bit. I'm sure nobody actually, said it in that way, but that's what they recognize about our industry. And in 2014, when OSHA revised a number of the rules that we operated with, OSHA, for the first time, actually laid out what our tailboards look like and created a standard for the tailboards that we were going to do by having minimum requirements. We had to accomplish this, and this. And those requirements came from the historical experience that we had with tailboards, and OSHA was simply putting those together in a written format so we could actually see what it was that we were doing that has been so successful for such a very long time. And now you find more and more and more that OSHA is making requirements of employers where it can be done that people are actually handling and having these tailboards. And that was the evolution of JSA's job safety analysis, or JHA, job hazard analysis. And that's what we do. And one of the things that is important about that is that as a crew of 4 or 5 people, it's not what they call a unilateral approach. So it's not like a boss and employees. The boss comes out, has a group of employees and says, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And when we do that, we're going to wear our hard hats and our safety glasses and our gloves, and nobody's going to get hurt. It's not, that's unilateral control over the safety of the group, because what we've recognized is that everybody in that group has a perspective, in other words, a viewpoint of what hazards exist. One person looks at the top of a pole and says, I see this, this, and this as a risk. Another person looks at the top of the exact same pole and sees something different because their experience, their background has a different experience, and they recognize that, hey, there's also this, and this. So we can then have a discussion, and everybody becomes familiarized. Everybody's experience now is the same. We're all looking for the same type of risk. And that's where our sometimes we call it our brotherhood on the crew works together to keep everybody safe. So the issue then is, are we stopping, or are we looking as broad as we could be? Because not everybody is now recognizing that things like using cell phone video to record the things that we're doing has some risk associated with it. So we're not doing everything that we can to effectively prescribe safety by looking at what the hazards are. And so now we've got guys strapping little cameras onto their hard hats and watching their whole work go on, which actually has some value to it, because we can go back just like a football team. What happens in a football game? You see that quarterback after he's tried to make 5 or 6 throws and it didn't work out, and he's in the fourth down, and he retires to the side, and the kicking team comes back out, and what does he do? He goes right to that laptop or whatever it is that they're looking at, and he looks at all the plays they just made. What happened? What could we have done better? Where did the threat come from? What was the risk of doing that play or making that throw or making that run? We do the exact same thing. We're a team. We should be acting like a team, and we shouldn't be doing anything that's compromising anybody on the team because of something that we want to do. We have to subscribe to the whole concept is that we're going to protect ourselves in every aspect of the work we're doing. Wow.
And don't discount your new guy, your groundman that's fresh out of school. Familiarity, I've said it several times on this podcast, familiarity breeds complacency. These guys are coming in, and they, number one, they need to know that they are valued on the crew. They're not just the grunt. They're not just, the tool getter or the guy that sweeps up or cleans up the trash or whatever. They're going to see things that you don't as a seasoned line worker. Even if you're 2 or 3 years in and you're not, the grunt anymore, but you're, actually getting to work in the hooks and stuff, they're going to see things that you have already discounted the severity of because you're familiar with it and you've become complacent with it. So that the whole team, the newest new guy and the most seasoned professional on your team.
I think it's funny. You're actually quoting Chaucer, an author from many, I guess, centuries ago. I can't remember actually what his dates are, but he wrote in one of his more famous passages, "Familiarity breeds contempt," which means that the more you see something that you disagree with, the less it affects you. Mm-hmm. Now, in one sense, that's good. I remember the very first time that I climbed a pole in training. There was some nerves that were there. And then back, at that time, we didn't have the fall restraints that we have now. We just had our hands and then our safety that went around the back of the pole. And if you cut out, you're going to slide all the way down the pole, picking up every splinter all the way down, and it's going to be in your legs and your thighs and your chest and everywhere else somewhat not protected. And it was a little bit nerve-wracking. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you become. In other words, you sort of start to armor yourself against that risk. And it's the same thing when you get to the top of a pole and you work your way up. And so one day I'm 135 feet up in the air on a splice pole on a river crossing. And the first time that I got up there and the wind's blowing and I'm thinking, I've never been this high before, and that's a long ways down. And I remember what my first climbing instructor told me. He said, "Hey, don't worry about falling." He says, "Nobody in this industry ever died from a fall. It's that sudden stop at the ground that gives you a problem." And you sort of just get used to the nature of that risk. But see, that's where what you're talking about comes in. because that helper who has no experience, we need to encourage them to say, hey, I'm a little bit nervous about this. Is there something else that I should know? And that's where the crew, we have a heritage of really making fun of our novices when they come in asking for silly things like, I need a wire stretcher, or some other kind of stuff like that doesn't exist. I saw a pretty good one the other day. An underground crew was having to cut some pavement in order to be able to have access to a trench that they were putting in. They're going to be putting pipe in that trench to put wire in. And they were telling the helper that they were going to need to push start their material saw. So he's got this 18-inch blade friction cutting material saw, and he's running down the sidewalk with the blade against the ground, trying to spin the blade and get the saw to start. And of course, everybody in the background is really having a good time with it because he thinks that he's actually doing something that they're supposed to do. And they tell him, yeah, this is the helper's job. He's supposed to do this. So we're kind of notorious for doing that. And but back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, sometimes it got out of hand, and somebody would get hurt. And we can still have fun in those kind of initiations that we do with new people at the same time. But we don't want to lose the opportunity for that person to ask a question that actually opens up a door to something maybe we haven't talked about before. And why? Because we're so familiar with that risk and with that nature, so that we build up this resistance to fear over the hazard, that we completely forget that it's there. And sometimes we need to be reminded. And the question that comes from a novice that doesn't know any better could actually have a very important effect on the safety of the crew's performance on that day.
Yeah, definitely. And and I'll say this as somebody who's been sent for blinker fluid more than once, unfortunately. I'm not the smartest. You can't. Yes, that's part of building the rapport and the camaraderie that a crew has. But on the same vein, if it's done incorrectly, it can tear them down. And if you tell the guys, or you discount their opinion or their view of a hazard, they're not going to speak it more than once. You tell them, yeah, shut up, new kid. You don't know what you're talking about. That's the last time you're going to hear them speak up.
I want to tell you about two things that we used to do that were really funny and we really look forward to in one aspect and didn't look forward to in another. And it had to do with two rites of passage when you came into the power line industry. So when you first came in, you were going to get an ice bath. You didn't know it, and it was a whole lot of fun when we did it, and everybody knew that it was coming up. We just had to wait for the right time, and it was usually at lunch. And crew comes off the pole or off the structure, whatever it is that we're doing, and everybody's sitting around on your hard hats or stumps or whatever we've got. And then somebody starts a conversation about who the strongest person on the crew is, and they say, well, I saw old what's his name, and this happened to me too. And I said, I saw old what's his name lift 3 linemen and actually do a curl with 3 linemen. It was probably the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. The guy was so strong. And then somebody says, well, how do you do a curl with 3 linemen? And he says, well, you lock each other together with your arms and your arm around the neck of each other, and it actually kind of makes a pretty rigid arrangement there. And then you roll everybody together, and then you just picks them up by the belt and does a curl. And they said, no. They said, oh, yeah, really, watch. Come, I'll show you. Hey, Vaughn, come over here. Okay, you lay down right there in the middle. And then another lineman comes over and gets on the right, and another one comes over to the left, and they all interlock our arms around our necks and interlock our legs. And then this third guy, he steps in there, and he says, well, is this belt going to hold? And he's grabbing your belt, and he's shaking it, but you're not paying attention to what he's doing. He's really undoing your belt. Because what you don't know is that there's a 5th guy with a whole ice chest full of ice water, And what he's getting ready to do is jerk your belt open, and they're going to slam you with a whole ice chest full of ice water, and everybody on the outside rolls away, and you spend the next few hours drenched in ice water, working through the afternoon, getting ready to finish your day. And that was pretty funny, and you realize, okay, I guess I'm part of it. I made it, because that's part of that of that evolution of your relationship and being part of the crew. The next one is not quite so funny, and it occurs on the day that you become a journeyman lineman. So I grew up in Union. And so in order to get that journeyman, you have to bid it by seniority. Once you've finished all of your training and you have your certificate and you are a journeyman lineman, but you're still an 8-step apprentice, and you're waiting for that job to come open that you can bid. And you'll have the seniority and you'll get the job. And so I was at the service center. I had bid the job. I got the notice. I got my job. I was going to be a lineman, and it was going to be in a different yard. And so on Monday, I was going to have to show up on that yard, and that's where I was going to do my first day as a journeyman lineman. But on my last day at the yard where I was working, I knew that there was this tradition that was called greasing the apprentice. And it is another rite of passage from the day that you become a stupid apprentice to the day that you become a journeyman lineman. And greasing the apprentice happens when we have these tubes of grease that we call, it's an inhibitor grease that we put on. Everybody that's on the call is probably familiar with this. We use it to lubricate, let's say, the socket of a meter, and sometimes we would use them to lubricate the conductor before we put it together in a connector. And it was just like a really super high quality grease, and it comes in about a 12 or a 14 ounce tube that you can squeeze out into streams of about an inch thick, and if you squeeze it really hard, you can actually squirt a blob of it, and it goes in a very uncomfortable place where it used to be ice and water and just cold, and the whole yard is going to be part of it, greasing the apprentice. And I knew that it was coming, and I knew that it was my last day. But we're all pretty sneaky in that nobody says anything about it, and everybody's kind of like whistling past the graveyard where you're thinking, I ain't never going to be there, and nobody's going to get me, and I'm 6'3" and 270 pounds, and ain't nobody going to grease me, is what I'm thinking in the back of my mind. But they say, well, maybe they forgot about it. Maybe that's something that we don't do anymore. And then walking across the yard at about 3 minutes until go time, and everybody else is pretty much still in the ready room. There's a couple of apprentices out there that are getting their trucks ready because that's what you're supposed to do. And I came around the side of the truck, and all of a sudden, there was a swarm of people who were waiting for me to come around the back of that truck. And they grabbed me and pinned me, and I was unmovable. And they dragged me to the ground. They opened up my pants, and I got 4 tubes of grease. And now that, unlike the ice bath that where it just wears off, that tube of grease don't wear off. And you're going to be with it pretty much the rest of the day. And but it now it's funny. It was a lot of fun. At first, I realized I was screwed and I was about to get greased. And then you just sort of have to put up with it, knowing that, well, I made it. And now I am a journeyman lineman, and I don't even squeak when I walk either, because it was a lot of fun.
For the record, ISPC does not condone greasing the apprentice. So.
No, we don't do that anymore, and it's kind of funny. I think it was it was kind of like an evolution of social responsibility. Somebody actually complained and filed a suit, and or a complaint, with the HR for the utility that I work for, and then it came down from the top. You can no longer do this. We don't condone it. It's a violation of people's, rights and stuff like that. It got kind of silly, and sometimes these issues ruin ruin a good thing. There's still some things that go on out there that happen, and we can still do stuff like that, have a funny, good time, make some memories, cement some relationships, as long as they don't get dangerous and nobody gets hurt. And that's where stuff gets carried away. But these things were done in traditions, and as far as I know, this went back decades. With ice and greasing and and stuff like that. Nobody ever got hurt. It was very well controlled. I mean, and that's what happens when you've got 30 people hanging on to one guy. The whole point is he ain't going nowhere. He ain't going to get hurt because everybody had just a little bit of pressure. But when you're that guy, you're not going anywhere. Okay, I give up, which I didn't really have any choice. I couldn't voluntarily give up because I was pretty much done. And those were some good days. So.
Attention all utility professionals. Are you ready to transform your safety leadership culture? Introducing IP Institute's Frontline Leadership Program, a comprehensive training program that will elevate safety throughout every level of your organization. Led by one of the industry's premier leading minds, David McPeak, this program offers in-depth modules on leadership, human performance, and incident prevention. Frontline delivers key safety problem-solving skills, either in person, in an engaging, interactive classroom session, or learners can become safety superstars through our convenient video-driven online course. Don't miss your opportunity to take your organization's safety culture to the next level. Go to ip-institute.com and join the thousands who have built a powerful, sustainable safety culture with Frontline.
UBM, Utility Business Media, our sponsor for this podcast. Their commercial's coming up, but I do want to tell you, man, it's a free magazine, IP, free magazine and app as well. Lots of good information, and our very own Jim Vaughn writes for that quite a bit.
Yeah, and I've been associated with Incident Prevention Magazine when they first started up, just out of I went to a safety conference, and that safety conference was sponsored by Incident Prevention, and it was their first safety conference that they ever did. It was an evolution of the idea of the owners, and the beginning of Carla Hausch was she's the editor and chief who started the whole idea of the magazine. She had a background in magazines, periodicals, and she wasn't even a lineman, but she had this idea and knew of this industry, and she saw that there was something that was needed, and to her, it was the opportunity to create and put in place a very well-controlled and high-quality investment in every line worker and every company from the aspect of safety and training. And so there was, probably only 20 companies that were sponsoring this thing, and I think there was only about 40 people that actually showed up, for one of the very first ones. And I had a long conversation with Carla about what was going on, and I became familiar with the first couple of editions of the magazine that had already been put out, and so Carla says, "What can you do? What can you think of that we could do that could do this or this or this?" And I said, "Well, I think this magazine is a really great idea as long as it doesn't become just a what do you call it? A mode or a medium for advertisements." What if there was information in there that really did make a difference to the people that were going to read the magazine? And at the time, I was doing consulting, and I knew the kind of things and answers that people were looking for. And so the first one came up, and she said, "How about write an article for us, and let's see where it goes?" And that was about, I think they're saying like 18 years ago. And that article evolved into what's called it's a reoccurring article called 101 Train the Trainer. And what I was doing was the exact same thing that I was doing as a consultant. I had the experience and the background and the resources that were sometimes very highly technical. And what was happening was that utilities were paying me Now, with my many years of experience, now I've been in the industry over 20 years and was a lineman, and they were paying me to explain to them in terms that they understood what the issues were, what the OSHA standards required, and what our industry was doing, and how can they meet those requirements and make the workplace more safe. And all I wanted to do was make sure that the magazine had this, we call them journals, and in every industry or segment of business, there is a journal that's out there, and the journal is the record of the history of that particular aspect of either society or business or medicine, like medicine journals and sports journals, and they have a very high quality of production with some very learned people that can explain things in a consumable way for everybody that's going to read. And everybody that was working on the magazine at the time had that same perspective of what they wanted this magazine to be. And so now here we are some 18 years later, and I've written, six of them a year. And that very first one that I wrote on, which is what they were having struggles with, was equipotential grounding. And the funny part was that I had a lot of struggles with it too, because I was a know-it-all lineman when I was climbing, and the whole idea of this equipotential came out, and I didn't believe it either, because I had traditionally grown up believing that bracket grounding, which everybody had been doing for many, many, many years, if not decades, and it was the way to protect you from being exposed if the circuit should become energized for some reason. And we had no idea that it didn't protect us. And so I had some research to do if I was going to write that article. And in doing that research, I had a brand new evolution on my own of how important this was and how important this whole idea of bonding to protect the worker was, and why the industry was beginning to embrace it, because they were looking back at history, and in particular, some very important research that had been done that said, hey, and this was all the way back in 1955 was when I first found this. They found out that bracket grounding did not guarantee protection, but if you were to bond that structure into that grounded system, that worker was protected every time. And then 20 years later, another group came down and said, hey, we saw this research. Let's see if it's true. And they did the same kind of experiments. And you know what they found out? Hey, bracket grounding doesn't work. And when I was doing that research and I found this information out, I became an advocate for the importance of equipotential grounding, because in that research, I found out that there were a lot of people in our industry, linemen, who had been killed by grounding that they put up to protect themselves. And a lot of people never even realized what it was that's happened. And I have seen that over and over and over in my consulting career too. A lot of the clients that we get at ISPC, especially when we're helping them audit and develop their grounding program, started out because something happened and some people got shocked, if not electrocuted, by the grounding system that they installed. And when they looked at what they had done and it didn't work, and they didn't know why, because they hadn't had the opportunity to do the research. And so they start doing a little bit of research. They find out about us, and they said, hey, maybe these people can help us. And then that's where they find out that their knowledge and understanding of what grounding for the protection of the worker really was. And OSHA has come around too and changed some of the wording and the way that they said some things so that people became aware of the importance of EPZ, equipotential zone. In fact, in the 2014 revisions to the standards, after that, a lot of people came to us and said, hey, what are we going to do about this new rule? Can you help us put it in place? We said, what new rule is that? And they said, oh, this rule that requires EPZ. because it actually said equipotential zone or equipotential grounding. And they'd never seen that before. Well, the requirement had always been there since 1974. It just never said EPZ or equipotential grounding for the protection of a worker. It just said grounding, and there was some wording in the rules that actually, when you interpreted it and looked at it, it was actually requiring equipotential grounding, but it never said that phrase. And when people read it, they didn't properly interpret it. So they didn't realize that equipotential grounding had actually been required since 1974. And now they're saying, oh, we got this new rule. We said, no, not a new rule. It's been the requirement since 1974. It just got a title in 2014. And now everybody saw the title that said equipotential grounding, and they thought it was something new. It was simply that it now had been codified and had a language to it that specifically said, this is how we're going to do the work. So I wrote the article. I made some explanations. It was huge. We really weren't heavily on the we were on the internet at the time, but when the magazine came out, to however many couple of thousand people were taking the magazine, a whole lot of people were emailing in, for more information. And one of the questions was, wow, this really explains it well. We understand it. Now we can implement it the way that it should be. And they said, well, can you write about, how do we do this in the underground? Well, there came article number 2. And I had never thought about the underground, but the same thing. I did the research. I started talking to some other people, started talking to some engineers that played a very big role in helping me to understand the nature of how equipotential grounding worked. And we found out that when it comes to underground, you can't do it. Which is really the bottom line. It's almost impossible to accomplish it, but there were things that you could do. And so the next article came out. And it's kind of funny, when that article came out, people were writing in, emailing in, saying, well, your guy's an idiot. You have to do this and this and this, and you have to equipotential, and that's what mats are for, and this and that, because they didn't understand. They weren't actually. One of the things that we did to show how this works was we drew out one-line electrical sketches of the work environment, showing all the ground pathways and the sources and the currents and how things happen and how you would shunt around the worker or tie the worker into the risk. And we found out that when we drew that out for underground, we had a whole bunch of pathways that we could not control or account for. And I took this sketch that I had helped to put together with an engineer from one of the utilities that we were working for. And we started taking it to different people, and they were going, wow, we never thought of that before, because there wasn't any reason for it. Nobody was, actually as anal as I was about trying to figure this out. And that's a Shakespearean, sorry, not Shakespeare, that's Freudian, by the way. I'm not being nasty. But I was really seriously engaged in trying to figure this out, to the point where I was making people crazy. And, at the same time that people were writing into the magazine saying that I was an idiot, the IEEE had a committee that was working on, and they weren't publishing this, these consensus standards committees do this kind of research all the time, and they don't publish it until they have a final product. And they were looking at that same problem. How do we create an EPZ in the underground? And so I met the people on that committee because they saw the article and they wondered who it was that was feeding information from their committee into the industry before they had verified and released it. And I told the guy who called me from a utility out west, who was the chair of the committee, I said, no, it's just coincidence. And I told them everything that we were just here talking about. And they were getting ready to publish an article. And they published an article, and then another guy from IEC out in California also wrote an article called "Worker Protection While Working De-Energized Systems in the Underground," or something to that extent. And what they were saying was it's difficult to do that, and you have to be worried about this and this and this. And they talked about the nature of current flow in a grounded system and how hard it was to prevent that current flow. It's always there. It's never going to go away. And how it created potential differences that could expose the worker to an electrical contact on a grounded system where no voltage was measurable. And so all of a sudden we had this evolution. So I survived that. And now if you go back to the records, IP has kept every article that was ever written since the very first journal or volume of their magazine. And you'll find out now that those grounding articles have some 11,000 downloads or so, where they're taking that information and using it to help develop their own programs or to teach their people. So the work that UBM has been doing through their different aspects of their business has been playing a very, very big role in safety that we'll probably never actually be able to quantify. But all of the people who have input into Incident Prevention Magazine have, just like that tailboard, everybody has a different perspective. And we have a board of directors, it's called the editorial board, that reviews every article before it goes into magazine. And that editorial board, just like that tailboard crew, has people from varying differences in their backgrounds. Some of them are linemen, some of them are foremen, some of them are supervisors, and some of them are engineers, and some of them are educators. Like our very first guest we're going to have is Dr. George Gala. I met him a number of years ago, one of the smartest guys in industry about high voltage phenomena, head of EPRI at one time doing research, now runs a consulting business. And we became acquainted with each other actually through one of the incident prevention's seminars, where we happened to bump into each other. He heard some things that I was talking about, and we developed a relationship. And man, he has taught me tons.
Well, we'll talk about him and other guests coming up. Real quick, got to take a break for our sponsor message. We'll be right back. Talk about what's coming up on Tailboard Talks 2. I guess Tailboard Talks with Jim and Jerry. But we'll talk about that. Quick word from our sponsor. We'll be right back.
IP Institute's Frontline Program, empowering utility professionals to lead with confidence and safety. Visit ip-institute.com to start your journey today.
Now, Dr. Jim Gala is our next...
George
Gala, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Dr. George Gala with Jim.
I'm Dr. Jim, but actually, when I was working on a master's degree at one time, I said, man, this is impossible. I'm never going to get through this. And I so much wanted to have a PhD, and so I decided I was just going to actually change my name to Dr. Jim Vaughn, and then people would say that not realizing that it was actually part of my name, think I was really something. But I'm really just a lineman that just, I'm the worst kind of lineman. I now have some college background, and I'm the kind of people that I used to say, oh yeah, one of those nerds. So what we say is that it's the worst kind of lineman you can have, a know-it-all lineman with a college degree. And the only thing that it taught me had nothing to do with power line. It just teaches you how to do research and how to find your way around the available information and material that's out there. So that's me. I'm just an old clumsome that figured it out.
So Dr. Gala is coming up. Also, we're trying to secure Pam Tompkins as a guest here in the very near future, and Mr. Danny Rains, which I can say this from experience. You and Danny were two of the first people that I met when I first got into this industry. And I tell this story to a bunch of people. the only time I have ever seen a group of linemen miss lunch was during one of your sessions at IP at the Incident Prevention show in I think it was Orlando probably, and the fire alarm kept going off. Well, finally they figured there was a fire in the kitchen, and it was a real fire alarm, and everybody shunted everybody outside, and then Danny had followed you in because you had left your laptop and everything in. Danny had followed you in to get your stuff to go to lunch because yours was right before lunch and it was going to continue after lunch. They cornered everybody that was in that class walked back into there and cornered you two, and y'all ended up doing the whole session and skipping lunch. So that says something for a group of guys to miss a free lunch to talk to a couple of guys. So Danny will be on with us.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you there, Jerry, because I'm really looking forward to that conversation, because we actually have almost the exact same background with almost a parallel trajectory in the way that we got into safety and consulting, and we both were linemen back in the day of no fall protection and what we call smoke testing. We did a lot of stupid stuff that we didn't know was stupid at the time. It was just traditionally how we did stuff before we came a lot more evolved and started to realize, hey, there's better ways of doing this stuff. We knew where to be and where to stand and how to stay out of the way. But we've seen this evolution of safety because both of us were linemen before OSHA was ever invented, before it ever showed up on a job site. And so we had that transition period. And so both of us have very informed backgrounds because of where we worked, what we did, who we saw, and the kind of investigations and research that we were doing. And we really do enjoy, we call it holding court.
Stump the chump.
Stump the chump. That's the other one. We started doing the Stump the Chump thing at the IP conferences, where Danny and I would be in a room with 150 linemen and everybody else, and we would say we'll tackle any subject that you got, and we'd say try to stump us, simply because a lineman goes out and he works framing a pole every day, and that's what he does. He frames a pole, takes a pole out, puts up wire, tears down wire, while we're actually doing research about all the different kind of things that have happened, which really exposes us to a whole lot of other things. And then when IP Magazine evolved, we now had connections that we were making all around the world. And people were calling us and saying, hey, did you hear about this? Or what about this? Or what about this? And it just created a knowledge base that we now had access to just from our backgrounds, that we knew how to answer almost anything that was going to come up. And between the two of us, we do that. And then we also would have some informal opportunities where we would just sit out in the hallway and people would stop by and start asking questions. And then pretty soon you'd have a dozen people standing around, and we would just start kicking around some ideas, which would give us more ideas about some of the things that we were going to do. And that's where that networking idea comes from, and how things get done. Now, I haven't been to the last couple of conferences. I can't go to this one. Had some problems with a doctor that screwed up my knee, and I couldn't walk very good, and I finally got that fixed. And so I'll probably be at the one after next. But Danny and I have both talked about the fact that we kind of missed that opportunity to do that. But that's the next thing that's going on, is that there are people out there who are capable of doing this same thing. They're very competent. They know the information. They just haven't ever thought about the fact that it's something that they need to share with the rest of the world. And that's the reason why we mentor. And if you're one of those people that would like to be part, of that informal group or the formal group, we need people that have that gift or capability of being able to share in an effective way some of this technology that people need to understand in order to make and keep our workplace safe.
IP, the Incident Prevention Conference and Trade Show, coming up at the end of October in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm not sure if it's sold out by the time you're going to hear this or not, but coming up in March, the end of March, is the T&D Trainers Conference and Trade Show, brought to you in part by T&D Power Skills and ISPC, both. And you talk about a list of mentors and speakers and people to learn from. Jason Greer, Cody Morris. Jason Greer will be our keynote this year. And if his knowledge is half as good as his beard, and I know it is, the guy's going to be great to listen to. I know Jason. I've known Jason for a while now. Phenomenal individual. I can't wait to hear his keynote. Cody Morris, Mike Starner, William Martin, Brent Jeffries, your friend and ours, Mac Turner, Chris Beach, young up and coming guy out of Texas, Mark Savage, who we had on podcast previously. I think the last one that I did with Mark Forster was with Mark Savage on there. Eric Garza from Lubbock Power and Light. I did looking on his on our website. The conference website, I didn't recognize him because he's cut his hair and cleaned up on his headshot. Phenomenal guy, Dan Hannon. Tons of other speakers, and from UBM, David McPeak will be speaking as well. Kevin Marshall, Thomas Matalone, Derek Sang, tons of people. The T&D Conference, Trainers Conference and Trade Show, March 23rd through the 26th down in Orlando. So the first one of the year, get you out of the winter doldrums. If you want to know more about it, the easiest way that I can tell you to get to it is to log on to tdpowerskills.com, scroll to the bottom, and look for the conference and trade show link. Registration is open, and it's cheap at twice the price, basically. So check it out. Get booked early. It will sell out. Yes, sir.
And we're getting ready. We got to wrap this session up today. But I want to add, the names that you've mentioned. We have a lot of contacts with ISPC and T&D Power Skills with utilities all over the country and all over the world. And we've met some very, very interesting, competent, and capable people. And we learn as much from them as they learn from us for whatever they've hired us to do. And now we're going to pay that back because we have this list of people that we've got to know that we want you to know. And we're going to use the podcast to help introduce you to them, their unique backgrounds and their unique contributions that they have for the industry, both for safety and in training.
Absolutely. And in closing, I got to tell you guys, the views and opinions shared on this podcast are the personal viewpoints of the participants and may not necessarily reflect the stance of the Institute for Safety and Powerline Construction and its staff. It is highly advised to consult your company management before implementing any actions or policy changes. Also, please support the sponsors bringing this content to you. For more episodes of ISPC Tailboard Talks, subscribe to your favorite podcatcher and be sure to leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. Also, you can shoot us an email, Jim at ISPC Online, Jerry at TD Power Skills Online. If you have anything you want to talk about or you want to leave a comment or a question, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Jerry Havens.
I'm Jim Vaughn. Y'all be careful out there.